Rain poured like the heavens were mourning her. Each drop hit the forest floor like the sound of a clock ticking down to her end. Seraphina ran, barefoot, breath ragged, her pulse a frantic drum in the hollow of her chest. The moon carved pale veins through the canopy, catching on the blood trailing down her thigh. It wasn't much, just a cut from the last fight, but pain had a way of reminding her that she was still alive. Behind her, the woods echoed with the deep, guttural growls of wolves. Her pack, the same people who once swore to protect her, now hunted her like prey. Thunder cracked overhead, a violent warning splitting the night open. The forest bent with the wind, branches snapping like bones. The world itself seemed to chase her, roots grabbing at her ankles, mud clinging to her feet, every breath of wind whispering her name like a curse. Seraphina, run. She stumbled, her knees slamming into the earth. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. She pressed her palm into the dirt, forcing herself up, every muscle screaming in protest. She couldn't stop. She wouldn't. Her breath came in broken gasps. Her skin burned, not from exhaustion, but from something worse. Something inside her clawed to get out. A flicker of silver light pulsed beneath her palm. It was faint at first, like a dying ember, but it grew, shimmering through her veins. Her secret, her curse, the reason they chased her. She pressed her hand against her chest, whispering through chattering teeth, "Not again. I can't lose control." The silver flame hissed, wild and alive, curling around her fingers like smoke from another world. She buried it deep, biting back the scream clawing up her throat. If they saw it, if they felt it, they'd know. A branch snapped behind her. Seraphina froze. Her heart stuttered once, twice, then roared into her ears. She could hear them, heavy paws against the mud. Low, deliberate growls rolling through the mist. They were close. Too close. She pressed her back against the roots of an ancient tree, one so massive it felt alive, its twisted limbs forming a dark cathedral above her. The scent of moss and blood filled her lungs. The rain fell harder now, washing her scent into the earth, but not fast enough. A voice, deep, cold, and familiar, cut through the storm. "Find her. The traitor bleeds." The sound of it nearly stopped her heart. Her brother, the new alpha, the one who had marked her for death. Her eyes squeezed shut. Every memory of home, of laughter, of safety, turned to ash. She could still see their faces around the fire the night before the world fell apart. She could still hear her brother's voice when he swore he'd protect her, no matter what. Now, that same voice hunted her like an animal. She crawled deeper into the shadows, her body trembling from cold and fear. Her fingers brushed the scar on her wrist, the mark of her lineage, of the bloodline no one was supposed to know existed, the mark that cursed her. Another flash of lightning split the sky, blinding for a heartbeat. And in that instant, she saw their eyes through the darkness, dozens of glowing yellow eyes, surrounding her. Her breath hitched. "No, no, no, no." She darted out from behind the roots, sprinting downhill through the mud. Her vision blurred, the forest spinning into streaks of shadow and light. Every heartbeat echoed like a drumbeat of war. Run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Branches whipped at her face. Thorns tore her skin. Pain became background noise. The only thing that mattered was distance, as much of it as she could steal before her body gave out. But fate, as always, was cruel. Her foot caught on a root hidden beneath the leaves. She fell hard, rolling, tumbling through mud and rain until her body slammed against a fallen log. Pain exploded down her spine, white and blinding. For a moment there was silence, only the sound of rain and her ragged breathing. Then, through the mist, she heard them closing in again, low growls, the crack of twigs, the sound of claws scraping bark. She tried to move, but her body refused to obey. Her ankle throbbed, sprained, maybe broken. The scent of blood filled the air. They would find her any second now. Seraphina's fingers dug into the earth. She could feel her heartbeat in the soil, in the roots, in the storm above. The forest was alive, watching, waiting. And deep inside her chest, that flicker of silver light began to pulse again, stronger this time. Her vision shimmered, and for a second, she saw through the rain, shadows moving like ghosts, eyes burning with hunger. They were coming. And if she didn't do something, if she didn't use the power she swore never to use again, she'd die here. Her hand trembled. Silver fire spilled between her fingers, licking the air like a living thing. Then, a voice, not from behind her, ahead, low, rough, unfamiliar, but calm, like thunder that knew its own strength. "Don't move." She froze. The air shifted, charged, electric. A presence stepped out of the mist, tall and dark, framed in moonlight. His eyes gleamed gold, catching the storm like molten metal. The growls behind her changed, uneasy now, uncertain. Another wolf, bigger than the rest, prowled out of the fog. The others hesitated, lowering their heads instinctively. The new arrival didn't look at them. His gaze was fixed on her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The air between them vibrated, heavy with something unspoken. He looked like danger carved into human form. Broad shoulders beneath a rain-soaked cloak, jaw clenched, hair slicked to his temples. But his eyes were something else. They burned with something more than fury. Recognition. He took a step closer, his voice low. "Seraphina Vale." She flinched. "How do you know my name?" Lightning flashed, lighting up the forest. For a second, she saw him clearly. The mark on his neck, the faint glow of alpha power thrumming beneath his skin. He was one of them, but not hers. He was another alpha. She pressed her back to the tree, panting. "Stay away from me." He stopped, just out of reach, rain dripping from his lashes. "If I wanted to hurt you, I would have done it already." Her eyes darted between him and the shadows, where the others had vanished. The forest had gone eerily still. Even the thunder paused to listen. "Who are you?" she whispered. He tilted his head, studying her like he could see straight through the walls she'd built around herself. "Someone who's been watching you run yourself into the ground." "Watching me?" Her voice cracked. "That's not creepy at all." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more like he'd forgotten how. "You light up the forest when you're scared, you know that. Silver flame. Hard to miss." She looked down at her trembling hands, at the faint glow still burning beneath her skin. She clenched her fists until it vanished. "You should go," she said quietly. "They'll come for you next." "They already did," he said, "and they won't stop until they've buried both of us." Her heart stilled. "Why?" "Because you're not the only one breaking their laws." He took another step closer, voice softening. "And because the world's been waiting for someone like you." Lightning cracked again, and this time, the wind howled like the forest itself was warning them. Seraphina's chest tightened. She didn't want this, any of it. She just wanted to survive. But when his gaze met hers, steady, unflinching, almost gentle, something inside her shifted. For the first time in months, she didn't feel hunted. She felt seen. And that terrified her more than the wolves ever could. He reached out a hand. "Come with me, Seraphina." She hesitated, her entire body trembling. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, but behind her, the forest growled again. The storm roared louder, and something deep inside her, the same instinct that had always kept her alive, whispered, "This one won't let you die tonight." Her fingers brushed his, and for an instant the world went silent. No thunder, no rain, no fear. Just that electric spark, a pull that felt ancient and wrong and inevitable, the kind of connection that changes everything. You're listening to Wild Moon Narratives, where love and power collide under the full moon. Stay until the last heartbeat, because this is only the beginning. The rain thinned to a whisper, but the forest hadn't settled. It breathed, slow, cautious, alive. And in that uneasy quiet, Seraphina heard the soft crunch of boots through mud. He stepped into view like a shadow given shape. Tall, broad-shouldered, drenched in stormlight. His hair clung to his temples, dark as the night that birthed him, and every movement he made carried a kind of power that didn't need to shout to be obeyed. Kael Draven, Alpha of the Shadowbane Pack, a name whispered in fear and reverence, depending on who was speaking. But names meant nothing to her, not anymore. He stopped 3 paces away, the air between them heavy with heat and cold and everything unspoken. His voice broke the silence first, rough, low, threaded with warning. "You shouldn't be here." Seraphina's laugh came out more like a rasp. "They already told me that, right before they tried to tear my throat out." A flicker crossed his eyes. Not amusement, but something close to it, as though he recognized the kind of defiance that came from surviving too much. "They'll kill you if you stay," he said. "They already tried," she shot back, her tone sharp enough to cut through the tension. His gaze lowered, not to her wound, not to her trembling hands, but to the faint silver residue pulsing at her fingertips. The power she'd fought so hard to hide still glowed beneath her skin, betraying her. "Your control's slipping," Kael murmured. "You keep pushing it down like that, you'll burn yourself from the inside out." Her pulse spiked. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," he said softly, and the way he said it made her chest tighten, because it wasn't arrogance. It was a certainty. Thunder rolled again, distant this time, fading toward the mountains. The storm was passing, but the tension between them only thickened. Kael moved closer, slow, deliberate. He didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. The air carried his scent before he did. Wild pine, cold smoke, rain-soaked earth. It hit her like a memory, sharp, grounding, real. Seraphina steadied herself, refusing to look away. "Why are you here?" He tilted his head, and for the first time, a muscle ticked in his jaw. "Because they weren't supposed to find you yet." "Yet?" Her heart stuttered. "What are you talking about?" But he didn't answer, not directly. Instead, his gaze drifted past her shoulder, toward the shadows where the other wolves had disappeared. His eyes hardened, his voice dropping to a low growl that vibrated through the air. "They won't stop," he said. "And when they realize who helped you escape, they'll come for me next." Something about the way he said "who helped you escape" made her throat go dry. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew I was running tonight." He didn't deny it. Her pulse quickened, half anger, half disbelief. "So what? You've been following me." He met her gaze without flinching. "Protecting you." "Protecting me?" She laughed bitterly. "From what?" Kael took another step forward, his voice quiet but heavy. "From yourself." Her chest tightened. "You don't even know who I am." But he did. He'd known from the moment her scent hit the wind. His expression didn't change, but his eyes, gods, his eyes betrayed him. They softened, just enough to let the truth slip through. "Seraphina Vale," he said again, almost like it hurt to speak her name aloud. "Daughter of the Silver Flame, the exiled heir of the Vale Pack." Her blood turned to ice. "Don't call me that." "It's what you are," he said. "No," she hissed, stepping back. "It's what they made me." The silver light under her skin flickered again, brighter this time, and the temperature dropped. The wind stilled. The forest went silent. Kael's gaze flicked down to her hand. "You need to control that before it controls you." "I told you," she said through gritted teeth, "you don't know anything about me." He exhaled slowly. The sound heavy, measured. "I know what happens when power like that stays buried too long. I've seen it destroy wolves stronger than you." Her jaw clenched. "I'm not one of your wolves." "Not yet," he said under his breath. Before she could respond, movement flashed through the trees, the air filled with the sound of paws pounding against wet earth, fast, relentless. Kael's head snapped toward the noise. His eyes shifted, the gold bleeding into molten amber. "Stay behind me." Seraphina's body tensed. "What?" Before she could finish, a massive shape burst from the fog. A wolf, bigger than any she'd ever seen, its fur matted with rain and mud. Its eyes gleamed red with fury. Kael moved faster than thought. 1 second he stood beside her. The next he was gone, replaced by a blur of black and silver. The sound that tore through the clearing wasn't human. It was raw, primal, a snarl that made the ground tremble. The black wolf landed between her and the attacker, fangs bared, muscles coiled. The red-eyed wolf lunged, claws flashing. Kael met it mid-air. The impact shook the earth. Fur and blood and fury collided in a storm of movement. Seraphina stumbled back, heart pounding, every instinct screaming to run. But her body refused. The wolves clashed again, and this time, Kael drove his opponent to the ground. He pinned it, jaws closing around its throat, not to kill, but to command. A low, thunderous growl rolled through the clearing, and the other wolf whimpered, tail curling in submission. It took off into the trees, yelping. The silence that followed was deafening. Seraphina's knees buckled with adrenaline. She caught herself against the tree, chest heaving. Then the black wolf turned toward her, slow, deliberate. Its eyes glowed gold in the dark, and before she could blink, the air shimmered, bones shifting, fur receding, the shape of a man emerging from the wild. Kael stood where the wolf had been, breath steaming in the cold air. His chest rose and fell, every inch of him cut from shadow and strength. Scars ran down his ribs, old pale lines that spoke of battles fought long before this night. He wiped blood from his jaw with the back of his hand and met her gaze again. "You shouldn't have stayed," he said quietly. Her voice came out soft, shaking. "You shifted." He arched his brow. "You say that like it's a crime." "It's not that," she said, her throat dry. "It's that I didn't even feel you shift. One moment you were human. The next..." He shrugged. "Practice." She swallowed. "You saved me. Don't make me regret it." Something about the way he said it made her chest ache, that mix of warning and weariness, like a man who'd stopped believing in good choices long ago. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk yourself for me?" Kael looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because the moment you touched my hand," he said, voice low, almost reverent, the bond woke. Her stomach dropped. "What bond?" He stepped closer. "The one that shouldn't exist. The one that ties us, you and me, in ways the moon itself forbade." Seraphina shook her head. No, that's impossible. I don't have a mate." "You do now." She took a step back, shaking her head, rain mixing with tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. "No, I don't want this. Not with you. Not with anyone." Kael's eyes softened, but his voice stayed steady. "You think I asked for it? You think I wanted this any more than you did?" The silence between them stretched, raw, fragile, real. Then, from the depths of the forest, a howl broke the night. Long, low, furious. Kael's expression hardened instantly. "They found us." He turned, scanning the trees. "We need to move. Now." Seraphina hesitated. "I can't run anymore." "You don't have to." He reached for her wrist, his touch firm, grounding. "Trust me." Her breath caught at the warmth of his skin, rough, calloused, steady. "I don't even know you," she whispered. Kael's eyes burned brighter. "You will." And before she could pull away, he shifted again, faster than sight, and the world blurred. She gasped as strong jaws lifted her gently, the heat of his fur enveloping her as he took off through the forest, running like the wind itself had chosen a direction. The storm trailed behind them, and for the first time in a long time, Seraphina didn't feel hunted. She felt carried, safe. But safety was an illusion, and somewhere deep inside, she knew it. because destiny never comes gently. You're listening to Wild Moon Narratives, where love and power collide under the full moon. Stay until the last heartbeat, because this bond is only beginning to burn. The tower was half ruin, half memory. Stone ribs rose from the hillside, streaked with moss, the old spiral stair swallowed by vines. Inside, Kael had coaxed a small fire to life in what remained of the hearth. Its light stretched thin across the walls, painting everything in amber and shadow. Seraphina sat on the floor near the heat, knees drawn up, hair still dripping rain. Her torn sleeve stuck to the cut along her arm. Kael had bound it with a strip of his shirt. The fabric smelled of smoke and pine and iron. Neither of them had spoken for a long while. Outside, the wind moved through broken windows, and the tower breathed with it, slow, uneven, like an old beast that had forgotten it once ruled the forest. Kael leaned against the wall opposite her. His eyes followed the flames. He hadn't asked her any questions. He seemed to know she wouldn't answer. But silence, she realized, could be another kind of interrogation. When sleep finally pulled her under, it wasn't mercy that came for her. It was a memory. She is 13 again, standing in the square. Rain hammers the rooftops. Smoke clings to her clothes. The pack stands in a ring around the stake. Her mother's hair is soaked, her wrists tied with silver wire that bites through skin. Someone shouts witch. Someone else shouts abomination. Seraphina's throat burns as she screams for them to stop, but her voice is swallowed by thunder. The elders hold her down. Her mother meets her eyes. No fear there, only sorrow, and whispers something that Seraphina can barely hear through the storm. The flame was never meant to hide. The torch touches the wood. The fire catches too fast. The smell of it tears through the air, and something inside the girl snaps. Light explodes from her hands, silver, wild, merciless. The ropes on her wrists melt to nothing. The men closest to her fall, their cries cutting short. The square disappears in white fire. When the light dies, everything is quiet except for the sound of her own breathing. The bodies are gone. The rain hisses against ash. Her mother's voice is gone too. She runs until her lungs give out, until the world forgets her name. She woke with a gasp, the taste of smoke still in her mouth. The tower was dark now. Only coals glowed red in the hearth. Kael sat close by, awake, watching her. "You talk in your sleep," he said softly. "I wasn't asleep," she lied. He studied her a moment longer, then looked back at the fire. "You've seen too much death to still be afraid." Her laugh was a brittle thing. "Fear's the only thing that's kept me alive." Kael's expression didn't change, but something in his shoulders eased, as if he recognized the truth in her words. The wind outside moaned through the cracks, carrying the scent of wet earth and something older, iron, maybe, or magic. He spoke again after a long pause. "The power you carry, it isn't ordinary, it listens to you." "It doesn't listen," she said. "It argues. You fight it. Wouldn't you?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched until it became its own kind of confession. Then, quietly, "It's both a gift and a curse. You know that." She stared at the flames. "It's more of a curse than a gift." Kael shifted closer, the firelight sliding over the scars on his arms. "Maybe, but curses can be broken." "By whom?" "The same gods who gave them." "By those strong enough to carry them without breaking." The words settled between them like embers. She didn't look at him, but she could feel the weight of his gaze, the steadiness of it. It wasn't a pity, it was recognition. The night crawled forward, slow and uncertain. She told him small things then, half-truths dressed as stories. How the Vale Forest looked in spring, when the silver leaves shone like mirrors. How the river near her home hummed at midnight. How she used to think the moon spoke to her. Kael listened, saying little. When he did speak, it was about nothing. Repairs to the tower, the hunt that never ended, the packs that bowed, and the ones that didn't. But the silence around his words told her there was more he wasn't saying. When the fire began to fade, he threw another log on. Sparks rose, catching in the air like 1,000 tiny ghosts. She watched them float upward and vanish. "You ever wonder," she said, "if some of us are just born wrong?" Kael looked up. Wrong? Too much of something. Too little of what everyone else seems to have. He considered that. Maybe, or maybe the world just isn't built for people like us. The wind died, and the tower settled into stillness. Somewhere far below, a wolf howled, long, lonely, echoing off the cliffs. Seraphina wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. "They called me cursed," she murmured. "Said the flame came from the dark side of the moon. And you believed them?" "I believed the screaming. It's hard not to, when it's your name they're tearing apart." Kael's jaw tightened. "You weren't cursed. You were feared." "That's not much better." "No," he admitted, "but it's closer to the truth." Hours slipped by. The fire burned down to a low orange pulse. Seraphina's eyes grew heavy, but she didn't want to close them again. Sleep meant the dream, the stake. The fire. Kael noticed. "Rest," he said. "I can't." He reached into the coals with a long stick, stirred them until the light flared. "Then watch the fire until you can." So she did. The warmth blurred the edges of the room. The crackle became a heartbeat, steady, hypnotic. When her head finally dipped forward, Kael draped his cloak over her shoulders and turned his gaze to the doorway. The night beyond still carried danger, but for the first time since the chase, she slept without running. Dawn came slow, bleeding pale light through the ruins. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and cold. Mist curled along the floor like a living breath. Seraphina woke to the sound of Kael moving outside. When she stepped through the broken archway, the forest stretched below her. Green, endless, wet with dew. Kael stood at the edge of the clearing, bare-chested, the early sun catching the scars that crossed his back like maps of old battles. He was still, listening to something she couldn't hear. "What is it?" she asked. "The ground," he said. "It's humming." She frowned. "That's not possible." "Come here." She hesitated, then stepped forward. The moment her bare feet touched the grass, she felt it, the faint vibration, a low song beneath the soil, pulsing like a buried heartbeat. "What is this place?" Kael looked toward the ridge. "The Hollow of Echoes. It's older than any pack. My ancestors built their first altar here. Some say the moon's first child rose from this ground." She crouched, tracing a pattern on the stones. Symbols covered them, circles inside circles, wolves carved into weathered rock. Lines that shimmered faintly as the sun climbed. When her fingers brushed one of the runes, it flared silver. Kael's voice dropped to a whisper. "It knows you." "That's ridiculous." "Touch another." She did. The next rune glowed brighter. The vibration underfoot deepened, spreading up her legs, through her chest into her pulse. Her vision blurred, filled with flashes, fire, moonlight, a crown of ash. She staggered back. Kael caught her arm. "Easy." "What did you do?" she gasped. "I didn't do anything. You woke it up." "I didn't mean to." The air shifted. Light gathered around the altar, threads of silver weaving patterns above the stone. A voice rose, faint and distant, not quite words, more like memory turned to sound. Seraphina froze. "Kael." "What is it saying?" He shook his head. "I don't hear anything." She pressed a hand to her chest. "It's saying my name." The glow brightened until she had to shield her eyes. When it faded, the mark on the altar had changed. A single line of script, unfamiliar yet somehow understood. Child of the flame. She stared at it, heart hammering. "That's not possible." Kael's expression was unreadable. "It was written long before either of us were born." "No," she whispered, "it's a mistake." "There are no mistakes in this place." She backed away from the altar. I'm not some chosen thing. I'm barely surviving. Kael followed, slow and careful. You think destiny waits for people who want it. It chooses the ones who run. Then it chose wrong. He didn't argue. He simply looked at her, eyes reflecting the morning light. Maybe. But it chose you anyway. The forest stirred. Birds took flight, startled by a sound she couldn't place, something deep, almost like laughter or mourning. Every leaf trembled, every breath of wind bent toward her. The world itself seemed to recognize her now. Seraphina pressed a shaking hand to the mark glowing faintly on her palm. It matched the one on the stone. I can't be what they say, she whispered. Kael's answer was quiet. You already are. They stood there until the light dimmed and the mist began to rise again. The hum beneath the ground faded, leaving silence in its wake, a silence that felt like promise and warning at once. Seraphina turned away first. Take me back to the tower. Kael nodded, though his gaze lingered on the altar as if he feared what it had awakened. When they walked, she noticed he kept a small distance between them now, as though the very air around her burned. Back inside the tower, she washed her hands, but the mark didn't fade. It pulsed softly beneath her skin, answering some rhythm she didn't understand. Kael stood by the doorway, arms crossed. The prophecy, he said finally. It speaks of a flame that will either save or end us. Then you should kill me now, she said without looking up. He stepped closer. If that were true, I'd have done it already. Then why haven't you? His answer came after a long breath. Because when I look at you, I don't see the end. I see the beginning. The words hung between them like lightning caught in glass. She wanted to deny them, to run again, but her legs wouldn't move. Outside, the wind rose, carrying the scent of rain and the far-off cry of wolves. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the old power stirred, sensing the spark reignited in the forest of ruins. Seraphina sat by the window, watching the clouds gather, feeling the flame inside her pulse in time with the storm. For the first time since the night she lost everything, she wasn't sure whether she was afraid of her power, or of what would happen if she finally stopped running from it. You're listening to Wild Moon Narratives, where love and power collide under the full moon. Stay until the last heartbeat, because fate has only just begun to speak. The storm had passed by dawn, but the air still trembled with what had been. The forest wore its silence like a bruise, heavy, dark, unwilling to heal. When Seraphina followed Kael through the fog, her breath caught at the world ahead of her. The path was narrow and crooked, carved into the earth as though something older than time had dragged its claws there long ago. Mist clung to the roots and branches. Every sound, the crunch of wet leaves underfoot, the whisper of her heartbeat, felt amplified in that strange, suspended quiet. Kael walked ahead, his stride steady, the black cloak around his shoulders, catching the faintest gleam of moonlight. There was something about the way he moved, careful, deliberate, that made the air around him seem alive. He didn't speak, not yet. He was listening, always listening. The wind carried voices tonight, not human ones, older, the kind that lived in stone and shadow. Seraphina could feel them. They brushed against her thoughts, tugged at her pulse, whispered in languages she shouldn't have understood, but somehow did. She swallowed hard. What is this place? Kael stopped. He turned slightly, his silver eyes finding hers through the haze. A place forgotten by most, feared by the rest. His gaze lingered a moment too long, then he stepped aside, letting her see what waited beyond the rise. The valley opened before them, a vast bowl of earth surrounded by cliffs of pale stone. In the center stood a ring of ancient monoliths, each one etched with symbols that shimmered faintly under the fading moon. The air smelled of rain and ash and something older, something sacred. It was beautiful and terrifying. The hollow of echoes. She had heard the name before. Once, whispered by her mother on a night filled with thunder and grief. "If you ever find it, my heart," her mother had said, "you'll know the truth of who you are." Seraphina's throat tightened. The truth has always been a dangerous thing. She moved closer, drawn by an invisible pull. Her fingers brushed against the nearest stone. The symbol beneath her skin flared to life, silver light bleeding outward like veins of molten moonfire. The glow spread to the others. One by one, the stones awakened. The valley filled with light. Kael's jaw clenched. He stepped closer, his hand brushing the hilt of his blade, as if the radiance itself might attack. But when he saw her face, eyes wide, breath shallow, he hesitated. The wind rose, swirling between them, carrying the low hum of a chant that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. When the silver flame awakens, the voices intoned, "The shadow's alpha must kneel, or the world will burn." The air rippled. The earth beneath their feet vibrated. Seraphina staggered back, clutching her arm where the mark blazed like living fire. Her skin shimmered, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. She tried to smother the light with her palm, but it pulsed through her fingers like a heartbeat, wild, ancient, undeniable. Kael reached for her but stopped halfway, caught between instinct and reason. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, restless. He knew the words. Every alpha of the Shadowbane line did. The prophecy of the silver flame, spoken in blood and sealed in bone. It was the story of the one power that could unmake them all. And now it had a face. Seraphina's breath came ragged. "What does it mean?" Kael's expression was unreadable, but his voice was low, almost reverent. "It means the gods have a cruel sense of humor." Lightning tore across the distant horizon, splitting the clouds in two. The brief flash illuminated the valley, and for an instant, Kael saw something flicker across her skin. A sigil, circular and intricate, spiraling from her wrist to her shoulder like a living brand. It wasn't just light, it was language, ancient and alive. He stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, careful not to startle her. "You've been marked," he murmured. "Chosen?" Seraphina shook her head, voice trembling. "No, I'm cursed. You saw what I did to my pack. You saw what I am." "What you are," Kael said quietly, "is the reason the world still stands." The words hit her like a blow. She looked at him, searching his face for mockery or pity, but there was none. Just that calm, dangerous certainty that lived in his gaze. Still, she couldn't believe it. How could she? The silver flame had only ever brought death, to her mother, to her home, to every bond she'd ever dared to trust. She turned away, gripping her arms as if she could hold herself together by sheer force. If that prophecy is true, then I'm the end of everything. Kael's voice softened, but it held weight. Or the beginning. For a long time, there was only the wind. The valley breathed around them, old and watchful. Seraphina sank to her knees. The power thrummed beneath her palms where they met the earth. It was different now, not wild and consuming, but alive, a pulse syncing with her own. She could feel the world breathing through her, every root, every heartbeat of the forest, every drop of rain sliding down the stones. It was too much. Too intimate, too real. She gasped, trying to break free of it, but Kael's hand closed around her wrist, firm, grounding. "Breathe," he murmured. "Don't fight it." His touch was warm despite the cold air, his presence steady in the storm of her senses. She hated how much she needed it, how much his calm anchored her. "I can't," she whispered. Yes, you can." His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, where her pulse raced against his touch. "It's only power. It doesn't decide who you are." She wanted to believe him. Gods, she wanted to, but power had never been kind to her. It had taken everything. The ground shuddered again, and a burst of light flared from the monoliths, throwing both of them backward. When the brilliance faded, the symbols dimmed. but the mark on Seraphina's arm remained, burning faintly like the memory of fire. Kael stood slowly, eyes fixed on her as if seeing her for the first time. "The child of flame," he said under his breath. "It's real." She looked up at him, eyes reflecting the dying light. "And what happens to the world now that she's awake?" Kael didn't answer. The question wasn't one anyone had ever wanted to test. The hollow of echoes was silent once more, but the air felt changed, charged, alive. The prophecy had stirred, and with it, something ancient had begun to wake, and neither of them could stop it now. The cave was a wound cut deep into the mountain, the kind the world forgets to heal. Rain whispered at its mouth, soft as regret, while firelight licked the stone walls in restless shades of amber and gold. Inside, two figures sat close enough for breath to mingle, yet far enough for silence to breathe between them. Seraphina's body still trembled from the fight. Smoke and blood clung to her skin. Her shoulder burned where the shadow beast's claws had grazed her, and when she moved, pain flared sharp and hot. Kael crouched beside her, his broad back half-turned to the fire. The muscles beneath his torn shirt flexed as he ground herbs with the flat of his dagger. He didn't look at her while he worked, but she felt his attention all the same, like the gravity of a full moon pulling at the tide. He reached for her arm. His touch was careful, the pressure measured, almost reverent. "Hold still." The salve was cool against her skin, yet the warmth of his hand bled through it. She bit back a hiss, teeth sinking into her lower lip. Kael's eyes flicked up at the sound, silver catching the firelight, sharp and searching. For a moment, neither moved. The only sound was the crackle of the flames and the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing. "You shouldn't have stayed to fight," he said finally. His voice carried the quiet anger of someone who'd watched too many people die. "If I'd run, they'd have taken you," she whispered, "and I'm tired of running." Kael bound the wound with a strip of cloth torn from his sleeve. His hands were sure, the motion practiced, but something inside him faltered. He'd known warriors with her fire before. Brave, reckless souls who believed courage could outpace fate. They'd all fallen. "You don't owe me your life," he said. Seraphina met his gaze, the corners of her mouth tightening. "Maybe not. But I owe myself the chance to stop being afraid." The words hung between them, fragile and true. Outside, the rain eased, turning to a fine mist that silvered the entrance of the cave. The storm had passed, but the tension hadn't. It lived in the air, in the flicker of her eyes and the rigid set of his jaw. Kael rose and poured water from a flask into his palm, rinsing blood from his knuckles. Scars lined his hands, old, jagged, each one a history he never told. Seraphina watched the water run crimson before fading clear again. Something about that sight, about him, pulled at her. "Those scars," she said quietly. "Do you remember each one?" He considered her for a long moment, then sat opposite her, the fire a small barrier of light between them. "Everyone. They remind me what loyalty costs." She waited. He'd never spoken of his past, never let her see the cracks beneath his command. But tonight, the mountains seemed to press close, demanding truth. "There was a woman," he said. His tone was low, stripped of the strength it usually carried. "She was the daughter of an elder. I thought she loved me." A bitter smile ghosted across his lips. "She loved the power my name could bring her. When the council turned against me, she was the first to raise the knife." Seraphina's heart twisted. She wanted to speak, to say that betrayal was something she understood too well, but the look on his face silenced her. The pain there wasn't raw. It was old, calcified, worn down to something colder than grief. "She sold our secrets to my brother's rivals," Kael continued. "The war that followed nearly destroyed the pack. I took the blame to spare the rest." His gaze lifted to her, sharp again, measuring. "So no, I don't give trust easily." The flames cracked, sending a shower of sparks toward the dark. Seraphina felt the heat on her cheeks. "My mother used to tell me that love and ruin are twins," she murmured. She proved herself right. Kael tilted his head. "Your mother?" Seraphina drew her knees to her chest. "They burned her," she said simply. "Said she was a witch because she carried the silver flame. I still hear her screaming when I close my eyes. I was 15. Silence fell, heavy and respectful. Kael didn't reach for her. He only looked at her, and in his eyes was something rawer than pity, understanding, the kind that comes from shared wounds. "She told me the fire was a gift," Seraphina whispered. "But gifts like that don't bring peace. They take it." Kael leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice quiet enough that the fire almost swallowed it. "Peace isn't what we're born for, Seraphina. Survival is." The words should have sounded harsh. Instead, they steadied her. She met his gaze again and saw in it not command, not caution, just the reflection of her own exhaustion. "Then maybe we stop surviving," she said. "Maybe we will start living." He smiled faintly. "And how do you suggest we do that?" Her eyes softened. "By trusting someone." The air thickened. The fire dimmed to embers. Kael's expression shifted, wariness giving way to something tender, dangerous. He reached out slowly, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. His fingertips lingered against her cheek, rough skin against soft. "Can I trust you?" she asked, voice barely above a breath. He studied her, the lines around his mouth tightening as if the answer might cost him everything. Then, quietly, "You already do." The space between them dissolved. For a heartbeat, the world held still. The mountain, the rain, even the fire seemed to pause, waiting. Her pulse thundered in her throat. His hand slid to the back of her neck, fingers tracing the edge of her hair. The smell of him, smoke, pine, blood, wrapped around her. Every instinct told her to lean closer, to close the distance that had haunted her since the night he found her in the woods. And then, howls. Distant, sharp, rolling across the peaks like a reminder carved into the wind. Kael froze. The sound broke the moment, scattering it like ashes. He withdrew his hand, the loss of warmth immediate. "They found us," he said. His voice was steady again, the Alpha's mask sliding back into place. Seraphina's chest ached with something she didn't have a name for. She rose, every nerve alive with the echo of what almost was. Outside, the moon spilled its cold light through the mist. The world waited, restless and unkind. They would have no more peace tonight. Still, as Kael shouldered his pack and turned toward the mouth of the cave, she caught the smallest flicker of softness in his eyes. Something unspoken, unguarded. It was enough. She followed him into the darkness, the memory of his touch still burning against her skin, the unvoiced promise between them as fragile and dangerous as the flame she carried inside. The night bled red over the Shadowbane fortress. Clouds gathered thick as bruises, pressing low over the mountains, muting the howls that rose from the valley below. Inside the stone citadel, the air hung heavy with judgment, the kind that could break even the strongest of wolves. Seraphina stood in the center of the great hall, wrists bound with chains forged from silver dust and ash, the kind that scorched a shifter's flesh just enough to remind them what they were. Her breath came ragged, every inhale cutting through the metallic tang of blood and betrayal. Dozens of eyes watched her own kind, her own people. Once she might have called them family. Now their faces twisted with contempt, as though the mere sight of her was a curse. The torches lining the walls flickered in rhythm, with the murmurs rising like dark prayers. Witch, curse-born, monster. She didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that showing pain only fed the hunger of the crowd. But when her gaze lifted, and she saw Kael across the hall, her pulse faltered. He stood at the edge of the dais, the mark of Alpha glinting faintly beneath his collarbone, where his wolf's power shimmered like contained lightning. His eyes, silver and storm dark, were unreadable. To everyone else, he looked every bit the leader, unshaken, carved from control. But Seraphina had learned the patterns of his silence, the tremor in his jaw, the way he avoided her gaze when torn between heart and duty. He was already choosing, and she could feel it. The High Council stood before them, 6 elders draped in wolfskin robes, their scent thick with dominance and decay. The eldest, Elder Varin, leaned forward from his seat, eyes gleaming with the kind of righteousness that had burned witches and banished children. His voice slithered through the hall. "You brought her into our territory, Alpha Draven. You sheltered her. You let her poison our air with the blood of her line." Kael said nothing. His hands were clasped behind his back, but his wolf pressed against the skin, restless. Elder Varin turned to Seraphina, lips curling. "The prophecy warned of your kind. The silver flame brings ruin. You burned your own pack once. How long before you burn him?" The crowd stirred, the sound like an oncoming storm. Seraphina's pulse thrummed, heat rising beneath her palms even through the chains. "Don't," she whispered to herself, "don't lose control." But the memories pressed in, her mother's screams, the flames, the smell of burning fur. The past clawed at her throat, demanding to be seen. Kael stepped forward then, his voice deep, restrained but trembling beneath the surface. "Enough, your twisting words. She saved us from the shadow beasts at Red Hollow. You'd all be dead if not for her." The hall erupted, half in defense, half in fury. Varin slammed his staff to the floor, the sound echoing like thunder. "She brought those beasts here. They follow her scent, her curse. She is the herald of ruin." The words hit her like knives. Seraphina met Kael's eyes, searching for the truth beneath his silence. He didn't look away this time, but he didn't step closer either, and that small distance, that breath of hesitation, hurt more than any chain could. "Kael," her voice broke, raw, almost human again. "Tell them it isn't true." He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable. The wolves watched, waiting for their alpha's verdict, and in that heartbeat, she realized something inside him was breaking too, loyalty and love tearing each other apart. Varin's voice came again, dripping with venom. "He won't, because even he knows the truth of what you are." Lightning cracked through the sky above, lighting the hall in white fire. The air shivered with tension. The wolves began to growl, low and unified. The sound vibrated in her bones. Seraphina felt the flame stirring, that silver pulse deep in her veins, begging to be freed. She squeezed her fists, the heat burning against her skin. If she let it out, she could kill them all. If she held it in, she might destroy herself. Her power trembled, a heartbeat away from chaos. And then, a sound sliced through the noise, a voice, sharp and cruel. "She's lying." A young scout stepped forward from the shadows. Kael's own packmate, Ryan, eyes wide with desperate fury. His arm was bandaged from the earlier battle. He dropped to one knee before the council. "I saw her call the flames myself. The beasts came for her. She's no savior. She's the reason we bleed." Gasps, growls. The crowd surged forward, and the chains bit into Seraphina's wrists as she stumbled backward. Her breath came sharp and wild. Betrayal had a smell, bitter, like iron and ash, and it filled her lungs until she thought she might drown in it. Kael turned on Ryan, voice edged with rage. "You don't know what you saw." "I saw enough," Ryan spat. "She's turning you against your own blood, Alpha." "She's making you weak." And then, the words that sealed it all. "She's the reason your brother is dead." The hall froze. Kael's face went still, his breath halting mid-inhale. The weight of that accusation cracked something in the air. Even the flames and the torches seemed to bow in silence. Seraphina felt the world tilt beneath her. Kael's brother, the one he never spoke of, the ghost behind every scar he carried. She didn't even know his name, only that his death was the wound that made Kael the man he was. And now, her name had been tied to it. "That's a lie," she whispered, but her voice was drowned out by the uproar. The council seized it like blood in the water. "The flame consumes all it touches," Elder Varen cried. "Her destiny is destruction. The prophecy does not lie." They began to chant, old words, sacred and damning. Her body trembled with the sound, the vibrations digging beneath her skin. Her wolf growled inside her chest, desperate, furious. The flame surged up her arms, silver veins crackling through her skin like lightning. Kael moved, a step forward, maybe two, and that was when everything shattered. The guards lunged to restrain her, but the silver chains snapped like threads. The power burst out of her in a scream, wild and untamed. The fire wasn't red. It was silver, cold and merciless, light bending around it as it tore through the hall. The elders shouted. Wolves shifted midair, claws scraping stone. The walls groaned under the force of her unleashed magic. Kael reached her just as the explosion hit, his arms wrapping around her, shielding her with his body. The blast sent both of them crashing through the marble dais, through the great doors, out into the storm-soaked courtyard beyond. The fortress behind them roared with flame. Silver, endless silver, and in the wreckage, screams echoed of wolves who had once called her one of their own. Seraphina collapsed to her knees, rain hissing as it struck her burning skin. Her heart pounded like thunder, and her body shook from the weight of what she'd done. Kael knelt beside her, hand on her shoulder, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. She looked at him, waiting for the words that would save her, or damn her completely. But Kael said nothing. He just stared, and in that silence, Seraphina understood. He wasn't her savior, not anymore. He was her witness. The thunder rolled, the rain fell harder. And Seraphina Vale, the girl with the silver flame, ran once more into the storm, the echoes of betrayal burning behind her. This is Wild Moon Narratives, where love burns and destiny bleeds silver. Stay with me. The fire's only just begun. The storm had quieted, but the mountain was far from still. Wind moaned through the jagged peaks, carrying whispers that weren't quite wind. Voices half-remembered, echoing through bone and stone. Seraphina climbed higher, her breath raw in her throat, her hands streaked with mud and blood and silver light that refused to die down, no matter how much she willed it. Every step hurts. Every heartbeat reminded her of what she'd lost. The chains were gone, but the memory of them still burned into her skin. The cold taste of silver, the weight of Kael's silence. She didn't know where she was going anymore, only that she couldn't stop. Not yet, not while her heart still beats. Below her, the valley smoldered. What was left of the fortress, nothing but ruin and ember. She could still smell the smoke, still see the faces that had screamed her name in accusation before the fire took them. Monster, witch, curse. The words clawed at her ribs, but higher up, beyond the ache, beyond the grief, something called her. A hum that wasn't sound, a rhythm that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. It wasn't a storm, it wasn't the wolves. It was older, older than Pax, older than blood. She reached a ledge, her breath misting in the cold air, and there, carved into the mountainside, was a temple, or what was left of one. Broken columns stood like ribs of a dead god. Moonlight pooled on its floor, silver and liquid. At its center, a single altar glowed faintly. Cracked stone, veins of light running through it like the heartbeat of the world. Seraphina stepped closer, and the world went silent. No wind, no sound, only light. The glow from the altar flared, soft but consuming, and in that light, a figure began to form. Tall, radiant, ethereal, the kind of beauty that hurts to look at. Her skin was moonlight itself, her eyes endless night. The moon goddess. Seraphina dropped to her knees before she even realized it. Her wolf, the thing inside her that always bristled, always fought, went utterly still. Her breath caught in her throat. The goddess spoke, but not in words. The sound came like song, like memory, like the whisper of her mother's voice before the flames took her. You run from what was never meant to be caged. Seraphina's lips parted, but her voice was trembling. I didn't ask for this. The fire, the pain, the deaths. And yet they are yours, the goddess answered. Yours to carry, yours to command. You were not cursed, child of flame. You were chosen. The words hit her like a strike. Chosen. The same word that had once felt like mockery, now thrummed with truth. Chosen. To burn. Chosen. To survive. Chosen. To end what the others began. The goddess lifted a hand, and light spilled from her palm. The air shimmered with the image of a man cloaked in shadow. Taller than Kael, his form constantly shifting, like smoke alive. His eyes burned with hunger, and the sound of his growl made the mountain itself tremble. The Shadow King, the goddess whispered, the first alpha. The one who devoured his pack to cheat death. He feeds on fear, on pain, on the stories mortals tell to justify cruelty. The council served him, not me. Seraphina's heart hammered in her chest. He's real. He's awakening, the goddess said. Your fire is the only thing he cannot consume. Seraphina's fingers trembled where they pressed against the altar. She saw flashes, Kael's eyes, the council's fire, her mother's hand reaching out through smoke. All of it, every loss, every betrayal, circling back to this. Not fate, not curse, a design. So this is what I was meant for, she breathed, to burn his shadow away. The goddess smiled, not kind, not cruel, but knowing. To burn the lie that fear built, to remind the world that light does not ask permission to exist. The words filled her, fierce and endless. And then, the goddess was gone. The light faded. The night returned. But something inside Seraphina had shifted. The cold that had always lived under her skin began to thaw. The fire that once consumed her now obeyed. Not wild, not wicked. Hers. She rose slowly. Her reflection shimmered in the pool of moonlight at her feet. And for the first time, she didn't look like the hunted. She looked like the storm. The silver flame licked across her arms, not burning but illuminating, tracing every scar, every wound she'd ever earned. She lifted her hands, and the air responded. The mountain breathed with her. Lightning flashed, but not from the sky. From her. A cry tore from her throat, half human, half wolf, a sound that split the silence open and poured power into the night. Her body began to change, bones lengthening, fur rippling in silver streaks, her eyes glowing brighter than the moon itself. But she didn't fight it this time. She embraced it. The transformation was agony and ecstasy, her body and soul merging, no longer two halves at war, but one being made whole. Her wolf emerged, massive, radiant, silver fire pulsing under her fur. She stood at the peak of the world, no longer hiding from her reflection. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of her power. She was her power. She tilted her head to the heavens and howled, not in grief, not in rage, but in claim. Her voice echoed down the mountains, across the valleys, through every forest and den. Wolves stirred in their sleep. Packs far beyond Shadowbane lifted their heads, hearts pounding in recognition of something ancient returning. The child of flame had risen. But even as the fire settled in her chest, Seraphina felt the weight of the goddess's warning. The Shadow King was awake, and he was coming. The air grew colder. The stars seemed to flicker, one by one. Somewhere in the distance, far below the mountain, a shadow stirred across the ruins of the fortress. It moved like smoke and thought like hunger. And when it spoke, Its voice was the echo of every fear she'd ever known. "You are not ready, little flame." The words rolled across the wind, dark and heavy, but Seraphina lifted her head, silver fire burning in her eyes, and whispered to the night, "Watch me." "You're listening to Wild Moon narratives where destiny is forged in fire, and love burns brighter than fear. Stay close, the hunt is far from over." The battlefield burned beneath a crimson moon. Shadowbane was dying. Its towers, once proud, carved from mountain stone and moonlight, now lay shattered, swallowed by black fire. Wolves ran through the smoke, their cries of fury and fear rising like prayer, like warning. Kael moved among them, blood on his jaw, pain in every step, his strength fading but his will unbroken. The Shadow King's army was endless. Wolves twisted by darkness, their fur black as pitch, their eyes hollow with the reflection of an ancient hunger. They fought without breath, without soul, only the command of the thing that had birthed them. Kael's claws cut through another, the impact shaking his bones. The air was thick with iron and ash. His pack was falling one by one. He could taste despair on the wind. Bitter, inevitable. He had led them here. He had promised them the moon would protect them. Now, only the shadows answered. Thunder cracked across the heavens, a jagged sound that felt like the end of everything. Kael looked up, the moon itself hidden behind thick, blood-colored clouds, and whispered a name he swore he'd never speak again. "Seraphina." His voice was broken glass, half prayer, half regret. The moment the word left his lips, something shifted in the air, as if the world had heard, as if the world had been waiting. The wind stilled, the fire froze mid-burn, the howl of the enemy faltered, and then, light, not from the moon, not from the stars, from the mountain. A fissure split the clouds, and from it poured silver fire. Wild, living, beautiful. It wasn't a light that warmed, it claimed. It burned across the sky like a tear in the veil, and every creature below stopped to stare. Kael fell to one knee, shielding his eyes, but his heart knew before his mind could believe. She had returned. The silver flame descended in a torrent of brilliance, striking the ground with the sound of 1,000 heartbeats, and out of that blaze stepped Seraphina Vale, no longer the hunted, no longer the exile. Her body glowed with power that hummed against the very air. Silver fire rippled beneath her skin, her hair alive with light. Her eyes burned like twin moons, calm, unyielding, ancient. She was both woman and wolf, both flesh and myth. Every shadow that dared move toward her disintegrated in the light. The dark wolves backed away, growling, confused. They knew the scent of dominance when they felt it, but it wasn't dominance born of fear. It was something purer, something older. The essence of the moon itself is given form. Kael tried to stand. His breath caught when she turned toward him. For a heartbeat, the world fell away. There was no war, no smoke, no death. Only her. Only the woman he had lost, the woman he had betrayed, standing like fire made flesh. And yet she looked at him not with hatred, but with knowing, the kind that saw through pain, through lies, to the core of what remained. She walked toward him. Every step left trails of light in the ash. The shadows hissed, recoiling. The ground trembled with her presence. Kael wanted to speak, to ask forgiveness, to say her name again, but his voice was gone. All he could do was watch her. All he could do was remember the sound of her laughter once, faint, years ago, before everything went wrong. Then she lifted her hand, and the world ignited. Silver flame surged outward from her palm, sweeping across the battlefield in a wave that consumed darkness but spared the innocent. The corrupted wolves screamed, their forms unraveling into smoke. Where the fire touched Kael's soldiers, it healed instead, closing wounds, clearing poison from their blood. Kael fell to his knees again, not from weakness, but reverence. He could feel the power in her, the divine rhythm of the goddess pulsing through her veins. And for the first time in his life, he was afraid not of her, but for her. Because that much light, that much truth, never came without a price. The Shadow King emerged from the ruin of the temple, vast, shifting, his form blacker than the void between stars. He towered above them all, a storm of claws and rage. His voice rolled through the air, shaking mountains. "You dare challenge me, child of stolen flame?" Seraphina did not flinch, her voice carried like a blade drawn under moonlight. "I don't challenge you," she said. "I will end you." The two forces collided, darkness and light, and the world split apart. The light met the dark, and the world screamed. Shadow and silver collided with the force of creation itself. The ground split, mountains groaned, rivers boiled in their beds. Every living creature, wolf, human, and spirit alike, felt the tremor in their bones. The Shadow King struck first, his claws forged from the first sin of the world, each blow heavy enough to crush steel. His roar tore through the battlefield, a sound older than language, older than gods. Seraphina met it head-on. Her fire blazed brighter, not consuming, purifying. Every pulse of her power was rhythm, breath, heart. Her body glowed like a living star as she fought. Flame answered claw, light answered void. Her silver aura wrapped around the king's monstrous form, searing into the black mist that held him together. His laughter, deep, cold, faltered for the first time. "You cannot kill what is eternal," he hissed. Her eyes burned with something more dangerous than rage, clarity. "I don't need to kill you," she whispered. "I only need to end what you feed on." She plunged her hand into his chest. Light exploded outward, not just brightness, but memory, soul, truth. The Shadow King's scream fractured the sky. Kael could barely see through the brilliance. His body was battered, his blood hot against his fur, but his eyes never left her. He saw her standing in the storm of her own power, hair whipping like silver fire, tears gleaming against light that wasn't meant for mortal sight. Every flame that rose from her was a memory. Her mother's scream, the pyre, the exile, the first night she realized the world would never love what it couldn't understand. But beneath that pain, Kael saw the woman she had become. Not a curse, not a weapon. Hope. The Shadow King tried to fight back, his claws wrapped around her arm, dragging her closer. Darkness poured from his wounds, bleeding into her light like poison. "You will burn with me," he snarled. Her voice was soft, steady. "Then let's burn." She unleashed everything. Silver flame roared across the world, pure, endless, alive. It carved through the night sky like dawn breaking too soon. The Shadow King's scream became 1,000 screams, his form unraveling into ash and echo. He fell apart in pieces, shadow into dust, dust into nothing. When it ended, silence. A silence so complete it felt like the earth had forgotten to breathe. The battlefield was gone, replaced by a plain of glass and molten stone that shimmered under a newborn moon. Where the Shadow King had stood, a crater still smoked, filled with light that pulsed like a heart. At its edge stood Seraphina, trembling, alive, barely. Her flames dimmed to embers. Her hands shook as she looked at what she'd done, at what she'd become. Kael limped toward her, his chest heaving, every step a battle of its own. He had faced death 100 times, but this was different. She terrified him, not because she was monstrous, but because she was divine. She turned when she felt him near, her eyes soft now, human again. The silver had faded to storm grey, tired but warm. Her lips parted, but no words came. He closed the space between them. Her knees buckled, and he caught her, arms strong despite the tremor in them. Her head rested against his chest, her heartbeat erratic, fading. For a moment, he thought she was slipping away. Then her voice, barely a whisper, "Kael, it's over." He looked out across the ruin, the quiet bodies of those who had fought, the gentle rise of dawn light breaking through the ash, and shook his head. "No," he said, "it's beginning." She looked up at him, confusion flickering through her exhaustion. He brushed a thumb across her cheek, wiping away a streak of soot and blood. "You were never meant to destroy us," he said softly. "You were meant to save us." Her breath caught. The words broke something inside her, the last wall she'd built between who she was and who she was supposed to be. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not sorrow, release. Around them, the sky began to change. The stars shimmered, one by one, bending closer as though in reverence. The moon, her moon, flared brighter than it had in centuries. The world itself bowed. Kael held her tighter as she wept into his chest. His body shook with her, every sob a mix of relief, grief, and awe. He pressed his lips to her forehead, the contact grounding, human, real. For the first time since the war began, he smiled. "Come back to me, Sarah," he whispered. "Stay." Her eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly, that same molten silver that had once terrified even her. "I'm here," she breathed. "Always." The ground beneath them pulsed with new life, green pushing through ash. The rivers that had boiled ran clear again. Wolves lifted their heads to the dawn and howled, not in mourning but in rebirth. The old gods stirred, not with wrath but recognition. Their chosen had fulfilled the prophecy not by destroying but by healing. And as the sun broke over the horizon, gilding the world in light and flame, Kael looked at Seraphina and knew. The curse was never the fire. It was fear, and she had burned it away. He kissed her, a soft, broken thing, and when their lips met, the silver mark on her wrist flared, binding their souls like two halves of the same breath. No more exile, no more prophecy, only what came next. Two hearts, one flame, and a world reborn. The sky burned brighter, the wolves howled louder, and the story of the silver flame and the shadowed alpha was etched into legend, not of ruin, but of redemption. Because sometimes the end isn't a fall, it's rising. The night after the battle was too quiet. Ash still drifted through the air like lost snow, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The ground steamed where fire had touched it, and the scent of burnt iron hung heavy over the valley. Seraphina stood at the edge of what used to be the Moon Temple, staring into the crater that her own power had carved from the earth. Every heartbeat felt like an echo in that hollow space. The silence pressed against her ears until it almost hurt. She had won. The Shadow King was gone, dissolved into nothing by the flame that now slept inside her chest. Yet victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like mourning. Each breath she took carried the memory of screams, of falling stone, of Kael's blood cooling on her hands, while she'd begged the goddess not to take him. Kael lived, barely. His pack carried him to the healing tent, whispering prayers that wavered between gratitude and fear. When his eyes opened, they had not looked at her first. They had looked at the wolves kneeling outside, as though searching for what still remained of the world he was sworn to protect. Now, hours later, he walked toward her across the ruined field, the limp in his step betraying pain he refused to show. His bare feet left prints in the soot. Around them, wolves rebuilt walls, gathered the wounded, and buried the dead. No one spoke her name aloud, yet every head turned when she moved. Seraphina could feel it, the shift in their scent, the tremor of unease each time her silver aura flickered. Some lowered their eyes in reverence, others flinched, as if light itself might burn them. She wrapped her arms around herself, but the cold she felt came from inside. The goddess's words still pulsed in her mind. Balance demands sacrifice. Kael stopped a few steps behind her. They will never forget what you did. The wind caught his voice, carried it through the broken arches. She didn't turn. They'll never forgive it either. A pause, the soft crunch of his boots on gravel. Forgiveness isn't what we need, survival is. For a long moment they stood together in the silver dawn. The horizon bled from charcoal to rose. Wolves howled from the ridges, low and uncertain, a new song still learning its shape. Kael stepped beside her, eyes tracing the sky. The council is gone. The packs will look to me now. His jaw tightened. They will look at us if you'll stand beside me. The word is hung between them like a fragile bridge. Seraphina wanted to take it, to cross and never look back. But she remembered the way he had hesitated during her trial, the half-second of doubt that had shattered her heart more deeply than any chain or curse. Beside you, she repeated softly, or beneath your pack's judgment. His breath caught, but he didn't answer. The truth was written too clearly in the bruises under his eyes. The first rays of sunlight touched the crater, turning ash into glitter. It was beautiful and terrible, and she wished it meant peace. The days that followed blurred into work and whispers. Wolves from other territories arrived, drawn by rumor and fear. Some knelt at her feet, calling her child a flame. Others spat in the dust and called her bringer of endings. Kael tried to quiet them. He spoke to councils that no longer existed, tried to build alliances among leaders who only wanted her gone. His voice, once enough to command armies, broke against their superstition. Seraphina stayed on the mountain's edge, watching smoke spiral from the forges below. She could feel the heartbeat of the world underneath, the rhythm that matched her own. Each pulse carried fragments of power she had not yet learned to name. At night she dreamt of the moon goddess, eyes like twin eclipses, voices like water over stone. You carry creation, the goddess whispered. They will fear what they cannot rule. When Seraphina woke, Kael was always gone, out mending walls, mediating disputes, leading hunts. He was alpha again, surrounded by loyalty that came with claws. And she was something they had no word for. One evening, the council fire burned low. Kael returned late, shoulders dusted with snow. They want you to leave, he said. They say the land won't heal while you stay. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. And what do you say? He looked at her a long time before answering. I say they're wrong, but I can't make them believe it. The quiet stretched. Sparks cracked in the air, faint silver glimmers that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. She stepped closer. Then believe it for them. Stand with me, even if no one else will. His eyes softened, but pain shadowed them. You think I wouldn't? Seraphina, I've already lost everything for you. The words were true and wound at once. She wanted to reach out, to trace the scar on his cheek where the Shadow King's blade had kissed him, to remind him what they'd survived, but fear coiled behind her ribs. Not fear of him, but fear of the power that had saved him. Power that might one day destroy him, too. By the week's end, snow blanketed the ruins. The world seemed quiet again, but the quiet felt wrong, like a held breath. Kael summoned the packs for a final gathering beneath the old moon banner. Torches circled the field. The wolves stood in rings, their breath misting like ghosts. Seraphina walked among them, hood drawn low, the silver mark on her wrist hidden beneath cloth. Kael's voice rose over the wind. The Shadow King is gone. The war is over. The balance was restored. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone called out, At what cost? Another voice, She burned half our kin. The air thickened. Kael lifted a hand for silence, but Seraphina felt the weight of 100 eyes, the distrust pressing down. The silver flame stirred beneath her skin, restless. She still forced it. When Kael turned toward her, she saw the ache behind his strength. He wanted to defend her, but he also wanted peace for his people. And those two wants could not live in the same heart forever. So she stepped forward alone. I did what none of you could. I faced the darkness you ran from. I burned for you. And I would do it again. A low growl spread through the circle. fear, awe, something between. Seraphina's voice dropped to a whisper. If my power frightens you, remember this. It was born from yours. Every wound you gave me, every curse, every flame, they became me. The wind caught her hair, silver streaks gleaming like molten thread. For a moment, even the wolves were silent. Kael's gaze met hers, fierce and pleading. You don't have to prove anything anymore. She smiled, sad and tender. Don't I? Then she turned from the crowd and walked toward the ridge, the same path she had taken the night she first ran from them. Snow flurried around her like ash returning home. Kael didn't follow. He couldn't. The Alpha's duty chained him to the pack, even as his soul reached for her. At the ridge's edge, the moon rose full and pale. Seraphina lifted her face to it, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. The goddess's whisper returned, soft as breath. Balance demands sacrifice. I've given enough, she murmured. But deep down, she knew the sacrifice still waiting, the one no power could spare her from. Below, wolves began to howl. Their song wasn't mourning or triumph. It was confusion, longing, fear. It was the sound of a world reborn, but unsure of what it had become. Seraphina looked back only once. Kael stood at the base of the hill, head bowed, hands clenched at his sides. Their eyes met across the distance, two souls tethered by something neither could name, something that had survived fire and betrayal, but might not survive peace. She wanted to call his name. Instead, she whispered to the night, to whoever still listened. Would you have chosen me, or feared me too? Am I a savior, or a girl cursed with too much fire? Her voice drifted on the wind, carried through the valley, threading itself into every heart that heard. The moonlight flickered, and for an instant, her outline shimmered, half woman, half flame, as though the goddess herself was deciding what she should become next. And as the dawn rose over the mountains, a single thought lingered like smoke in the mind of every living soul. The story wasn't over. Not while the silver flame still burned. If this story lit something inside you, subscribe to Wild Moon Narratives, where love and power collide beneath the full moon. Because here, we tell tales that burn. The battle's echoes had long since faded, but the scent of ash still clung to the air. Seraphina and Kael walked through what was once a battlefield, now nothing more than fractured stone and whispering wind. Every step stirred memories. The cries of wolves, the hum of power, the fragile sound of a world stitching itself back together. The silver flame that had once poured from her skin now slept beneath it, quiet but never gone. Each flicker that moved beneath her veins reminded her that peace was not absence, it was restraint. She glanced toward Kael. The Alpha's stride was steady, yet there was heaviness behind it. He wore the victory, like a cloak he did not want. It sat awkwardly on shoulders used to war. They passed through a forest reborn from the ruin. The trees were younger, their bark pale, the leaves shimmering faintly as if kissed by moonlight. Life had come back faster than anyone could have dreamed, but it was not the same life. It was newer, wilder, something ancient remade in the wake of fire. Do you hear it? Seraphina's voice was soft, almost carried away by the breeze. Kael tilted his head. Hear what? The heartbeat of the land. He listened, and for a moment there was nothing. Then, a pulse, deep beneath the earth, a rhythm slow and deliberate, like the sleeping breath of something vast. He frowned. That isn't the land. She looked back at the scorched horizon. The sky above the mountains shimmered faintly red, as though the ashes there refused to die. The world was healing, but something else was waking. They reached the ridge above the valley. From here they could see their people, what remained of the packs, gathering. Wolves moved carefully, unsure, keeping distance from the woman who had burned gods. Eyes filled with gratitude and fear followed her every step. Kael's hand brushed hers. The touch was small, human, but it steadied them both. They'll learn, he said quietly. In time. Her gaze lingered on them, the lost, the faithful, the frightened. Will they? He didn't answer because he didn't know. Peace was fragile, and the world feared what it could not control. They descended slowly into the clearing. The elders waited, their heads bowed, not in reverence but in caution. A single wind swept through, carrying the last embers from the ruined temple. The Alpha and the Flame stood before the remnants of their kind. Kael spoke first. The war is over. A murmur moved through the crowd. No, one of the elders said. The war has changed. Seraphina felt the words in her chest, heavy and true. She turned to Kael, but he was staring at the horizon again. Eyes narrowed, instinct alive beneath his calm. A low tremor rolled beneath their feet, the earth breathing again. The Pax looked around uneasily, and for a heartbeat, Seraphina thought she heard it, distant, low, and unmistakable. A howl, not mourning, not of kin, something else. She exhaled slowly, feeling the moonlight gather around her shoulders. The world had seen her flame. Now it whispered for something darker. That night, the moon rose higher than it had in centuries, bright and full, until suddenly it wasn't. A shadow slid across its face, swallowing its light. The valley fell into half-darkness. The wolves lifted their heads, confused, restless. Kael's hand found hers again. It's just an eclipse, he murmured, but she could feel it, the hum deep in her bones. It wasn't the moon dying, it was answering. In another land, far beyond the mountains, a different kind of fire stirred. The dunes of the eastern desert glowed faintly under the half-moon. Buried deep within the sand was a temple older than language, its walls etched with symbols no living wolf remembered. A woman knelt before a pool of black water. The reflection that looked back was not her own. It was fire given form, eyes like embers, skin pale as smoke. The air around her rippled with heat. She touched the mark on her collarbone, a shape like a flame, but it burned red instead of silver. The moment Seraphina's light flared across the sky, she felt it. That pull, that whisper, that calling of something kindred. She rose slowly, her movements deliberate, graceful. Each step she took sent small tremors through the ground. In the reflection, her eyes brightened until the pool itself boiled. She is not the only one born of flame, she said. Her voice was calm, reverent. But she made the first mistake. She turned her face to the eclipsed moon. The shadow deepened. The stars dimmed. Far away in the valley, Seraphina's breath caught. A sudden pressure built in her chest, as though someone, or something, had whispered her name across the void. Kael felt it too. Sarah? She looked at him, eyes wide, unfocused. Someone called me. Who? I don't know, but it felt the same. The earth trembled again. The wolves backed away, whining, instincts older than words rising within them. The air thickened with electricity, sharp and cold. The moon bled a single line of red across its rim. Kael stepped closer to her, voice low, protective. Whatever it is, we'll face it, together. Her gaze lifted to the moon. That's what I'm afraid of. He frowned, afraid. That we won't be enough. A silence stretched between them, heavy, fragile, filled with everything they had won and everything they might still lose. The tremor passed. The moon's shadow shifted, light returning inch by inch. Around them, the Pax began to relax, the tension fading. But neither Kael nor Seraphina moved. They both felt it, the way the air had changed, the way the ground remembered. That night, when the fires burned low and the wolves finally slept, Seraphina sat alone on the ridge, watching the horizon. Her flame pulsed faintly beneath her skin, uneasy. She whispered into the wind, to no one, and to everything. What did I wake up to? The wind did not answer. It only carried the faintest echo from far away, like a mirror image of her own voice, darker, colder. Not what, it seemed to whisper. Who? The red-eyed woman in the desert stood beneath the dying moon, smiling faintly. Around her, shadows rose in shapes that were almost wolves, but not quite. Things of smoke and bone, loyal only to her. The true Alpha hasn't risen, she murmured. Not yet. She lifted her hand, and the horizon ignited with crimson flame. And far away, in the valley where peace had begun, Seraphina woke with a gasp, her mark burning hot against her skin. Kael stirred beside her, half shifted, the beast in him alert. Her voice trembled. It's starting again. He didn't ask what. He didn't need to, because above them the moon had gone dark once more. The fire sleeps, but not forever. To hear what happens next, stay with Wild Moon Narratives. The moon is never done with her children.